Thank you to both of my colleagues for coming together to show Chester County that we are here trying to fight for them in a very hostile political environment in Harrisburg. I'm State Senator Katie Muth. I represent parts of 3 counties, Berks, Chester, and Montgomery County. And as a Chester County resident, I also want to say thank you to Commissioner Moskowitz for your leadership here in the county, holding all sorts of things together all the time, even through COVID and now through this impasse. But leadership here alone in our county is not enough. And we obviously are feeling of an intense strain on our resources and our ability to function and provide necessary resources. I want to credit Senator Comitta for trying to schedule a press conference prior to this, and we were told to push the pause button, that there was a deal coming soon and that it wasn't necessary, and that was on July 24th. A month later almost, and 57 days past our constitutionally mandated deadline to enact a state budget. Can you imagine in any other job that you didn't do it for 57 days and still get to keep it and make a paycheck? It is not shocking, unfortunately. My short time in the Senate has revealed some of these political games that are played on a daily basis that many don't always see. Senate sessions held very rarely and also during the workday. And the only silver lining, maybe we can call it that, of this current budget impasse is that perhaps the public, the general public, is paying attention to the state legislature and what happens in your state capital or what doesn't happen in your state capital. As the Senate Republicans have held the majority in the Pennsylvania State Senate for 31 years, since I was 10 years old. You can do the math to see how old I am. And that has shown this budget impasse is a result of decades of dysfunction, of decades of pay-to-play and failed efforts to pass laws to remove special interests from our legislative process. And as Senator Kane mentioned, this is a manufactured, I call it a manufactured crisis. It's sort of like when we watch the federal government come down to the wire, as if all these things have to happen at 2 a.m., knowing your deadline, but it's just so we, the people, don't have time to read it. And unfortunately, that's often the environment in Harrisburg, where the Senate called us back recently to vote on a insult of a budget and an insult of a transit mechanism for the transit funding. And we got that amendment with maybe 39 minutes to read it, with no stakeholder feedback. And so they knew what they were doing. They all knew we were coming back. The Senate majority party, per the Senate rules, sets our schedule, tells us when we can come to work, tells us what bills we will be voting on. The minority party has zero power. We serve as minority chairs of committees that can't hold hearings or put bills up for a vote. So when I say we are at the mercy of the majority party, that is in its most true definition of being at the mercy of. We can try to amend bills, and we will be voted down and tabled, and the Senate rules also allow for a majority vote to end all floor debate. So again, I hope the silver lining is that more people pay attention to what happens in the state Senate, and I think a lot more people probably know Senator Pittman's name, but that doesn't change the reality of what we're facing right now. And unfortunately, there's a moment here to be met, and it could be a good moment or a bad moment. And I think that, I hope that my party, the Democratic Party, steps up and meets this moment with a vision and not a Band-Aid. And a vision means that we need to change Pennsylvania's overall very regressive tax system. And that starts with some very easy solutions. For 57 days that I've been waiting to be called back to work to vote on a budget, I've generated some great ideas, some of which my colleagues have introduced into legislation. But there is revenue on the table to not just fully fund public transit, all of our roads and bridges. I think that every bridge in Pennsylvania should be safe to drive on. I do. I think every road should be a safe road to drive on. I am humble enough to say, yes, of course, I fight for my district, but to know how an economy works statewide. We need the whole state to be functioning and for the whole state to be safe and fully funded. And that's just how an economy works. And Pennsylvania leaves a lot of tax revenue on the table that could be used to fully fund public education, fully fund childcare, fully fund all of these things And there are mechanisms that could be passed to do so. And that starts by making sure that we, the people, the residential and small business taxpayers of Pennsylvania, no longer have to foot the burden and carry that financial responsibility for all of our public infrastructures by closing a tax loophole that would require multi-state corporations to pay their fair share. Amazon, Home Depot, Lowe's, name your Fortune 500 company, they are exempt from paying corporate net income tax in the state of Pennsylvania. You pay more money than Home Depot or Amazon or Tesla. Name your big dog, right? And so again, revenue left on the table that we haven't tapped into. There's a tax exemption for data centers passed in 2021 for their equipment. I don't know about you, I paid sales tax on my MacBook Pro. So if a billionaire company can't pay their fair share in taxes to do business here, again, revenue left on the table. And I want to mention that the combined reporting I just talked about, closing the corporate tax loophole, is a bill by Representative Fiedler, HB 1610, sitting in the Senate Finance Committee as we speak. So there are solutions on the table that could be voted on. And these Senate Republicans not only didn't vote on five transit bills that the House sent over, there's Representative Fiedler's bill to require this combined reporting, because right now, Pennsylvania businesses that only do business in Pennsylvania, they pay their fair share in taxes, just not the multi-state ones. We also know that we are the second largest methane gas producer in the nation here in our drill baby drill Commonwealth. And as much as I have very strong feelings about science and climate change, there's no severance tax on that. Or maybe we could tax the billions of gallons of waste produced annually by that industry and clean it up, and we would have more revenue on the table. And maybe we should also just think about how taxpayers pay this portion, but, passive invested wealth by some of the richest people in the Commonwealth is not taxed. So I just said to my colleagues before we started, the Powerball, you heard, is up to one of the highest amounts ever. I played the last 3 times. I did not win. I pledged that if I were to win, I would fund SEPTA, but there are, I'm not above begging in this moment to save the economic crisis that the Southeast and all of these poor people that don't have SEPTA, transportation, train lines cut, our area is about to face that there are wealthy people in Pennsylvania that could donate to the Commonwealth, Jeffrey has. But just saying, there are solutions to these problems, and politicians have to have the political courage to drive those solutions. And there is compromise, but there's also a line where we can't continue to compromise our residents' quality of life and basic human rights in a budget every year. So this is political. Next year is an election year for half the Senate, the whole House of Representatives, the governor. And so keep that in mind. And as you pay attention to this process, and as Senator Kane said, if you can't do your job, maybe you don't belong in this line of work anymore. Your job is to represent the public, the people that vote for you, the taxpayers of Pennsylvania, or just the people you represent in your district, even if they didn't vote for you. And that's our job. And we're trying to do our job. It's very difficult to do our job when the other side doesn't want to go back to work. And I know I'm standing here with 2 people who want to do that work, who work very hard to fight for their constituents. And for any sort of comfort it gives that there are 3 senators in Chester County that are taking names and kicking tail, trying to make sure that this gets done right. And I really do encourage you to not just reach out to Senator Pittman, but Senator Ward, and also to make sure you watch this process as it all unfolds, and whatever deal comes to the table, that it's not like my first budget in 2019 where I learned the hard way about budgets. There was a bill that had general assistance, a program for the Pennsylvania's most vulnerable. And I couldn't understand as a new senator why we would be compromising and giving up this $50-some million program. And I had 13 amendments drafted to try to block this, horrible thing from happening. And it didn't. I got through 2 of them, and Republicans said no more floor debate. And then they put that provision in the same bill for hospital funding. So you're damned if you did, damned if you voted yes, damned if you voted no. And unfortunately, that's often the compromise that unfolds in Harrisburg. And I hope that this new, insurgence of energy by the public, that you're all watching this process, because it is about transit, it is about our region, but it is also about the process and how these deals are cut, and that you all deserve to have a government that meets your needs. You pay for this government. It's your people. It's the people's money that runs this government. So thank you, and we will continue fighting the fight and hopefully have a resolution to this funding impasse ASAP.